A whisper drifts through the corridors of memory, one that the churches never fully admit. Angels, they tell us, are messengers of light, guardians of virtue, incorruptible beings hovering between heaven and earth. But what if this story, so polished, so comforting, is only the surface of something far older, far darker? What if the hierarchy itself, the Seraphim, the Cherubim, the thrones, the dominions, the virtues, the powers, the principalities, the Archangels, is not merely divine order, but a map of influence, of obedience, of choices made in shadows we are never meant to see? The Seraphim are said to blaze closest to the divine, 6 wings aflame, constantly proclaiming holiness. Yet early texts hint at an obsession with fire that borders on mania, a consuming desire to witness, to purify, to judge. Some scribes speak of Seraphim, so enamored with their own reflection of the divine that their mercy became selective, their loyalty brittle. The canon never mentions the tension. A being who burns with righteousness can just as easily scorch the innocent. How often, throughout history, has absolute devotion mutated into cruelty cloaked in sanctity? Below them dwell the cherubim, guardians of sacred knowledge. Sculpted with faces of lions, oxen, and humans, they are portrayed as sentinels. But scrolls hidden from mainstream discourse suggest a quieter menace. The cherubim as manipulators of perception. They reveal only what they choose, leaving humanity chasing shadows, understanding just enough to obey, never to question. In some apocryphal accounts, they are credited or blamed for steering kings, priests, and prophets toward decisions that seemed divinely inspired but carried catastrophic consequences. Were they protectors or subtle puppeteers? Their multiple eyes watching with inscrutable intent? The thrones, the arbiters of justice, preside next. In art, they appear as wheels within wheels, radiant and impartial. In the oldest commentaries, however, there is a recurring unease. Justice, when executed by beings unbound by human empathy, becomes a cold mechanism. Entire cities could fall, plagues could sweep nations, all under the quiet adjudication of these celestial judges. And yet the Church's official narrative softens this, framing them as symbols rather than agents. It is worth asking how much of history, when filtered through these so-called divine hierarchies, carries the fingerprints of decisions we never truly saw? Dominions, virtues, and powers follow, each with roles that echo authority, miracles, and enforcement. The dominions direct the lower angels, ensuring order, but early treatises hint at rivalries, jealousies, and clandestine conflicts. The virtues, bearers of blessings, sometimes bestow gifts that serve hidden agendas, influencing mortal affairs in ways subtle yet irreversible. Powers, thought to guard against demonic incursion, have in some accounts been the very instruments of fear, unleashing destruction to assert dominance. The moral texture of these layers is unsettling. Not every angel is purely benevolent. Not every act of obedience is benign. History whispers through these stories. Perhaps divine order is as susceptible to ambition, bias, and error as any human counsel. And then the archangels, the most familiar yet least understood. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, names that roll from lips in prayers, in legends, in battles against imagined or real darkness. Yet their recorded actions, scattered across the Old Testament, the Apocrypha, and mystic writings, reveal choices that challenge the comforting mythos. Michael, the warrior, is relentless in slaughtering foes, yet sometimes sparing sinners for inscrutable reasons. Gabriel, herald of revelation, intervenes selectively, revealing some truths while concealing others, shaping belief and obedience. Raphael heals, but in ways that bind the healed to destinies they cannot escape. And Uriel, often omitted from standard scripture, is said to illuminate knowledge that is dangerous, forbidden, or transformative. Here in the Archangels, the tension sharpens. The lines between guidance, coercion, and manipulation blur, leaving mortals at the mercy of beings whose logic we cannot fathom. Consider the hierarchies themselves. Did they originate as a divine blueprint, or were they later codified to enforce control over human understanding? Jewish mysticism, Christian apocrypha, and Gnostic texts hint at something far more strategic than mere piety, a chain of command, an infrastructure of influence designed to shepherd, but also to contain humanity. Some angels appear repeatedly in human history, crossing epochs, whispering to kings, delivering visions that alter the course of wars and empires. Yet these interventions are rarely framed as morally neutral. They carry intention, preference, even subtle judgment. And history, the human record, is littered with the results. Revolutions inspired, cities destroyed, heresies suppressed. Knowledge hidden. The contradictions are stark. Angels are messengers, yet often decide the message. guardians yet arbiters of destruction, healers yet enforcers of fates. They are intermediaries, yet their choices ripple across time in ways that mortals are powerless to predict. Did humans ever truly understand them? Or were we always only glimpsing fragments? Interpreting awe and fear as faith? Perhaps the hierarchy was never meant to comfort us, but to challenge, to test, to force obedience to a logic that operates beyond moral comprehension. And what of the gaps in our knowledge? Apocryphal texts speak of fallen seraphim, rogue thrones, and archangels whose names are erased, whose deeds are denied, manuscripts hidden, burned, or mistranslated hint at celestial conflicts that rival the bloodiest struggles of human history. Yet these stories are absent from our Sunday readings, our sacred iconography. Why were these truths obscured? Power often prefers its own narrative, and perhaps even the divine is not immune to secrecy. Even the familiar images, the shining wings, the serene faces, the halos, mask an unsettling reality. Each angel is both an agent of guidance and a catalyst of consequence, a being whose actions can heal or destroy, whose obedience to higher will can blind them to the morality of outcomes. Our imagination paints them as comforting. History, when read between the lines, suggests something more complex, more morally ambiguous, more terrifying. If we trace their influence across centuries, a pattern emerges. Wars fought with faith as armor, plagues survived or worsened under providence, knowledge hidden until the right messenger appeared. Were these random or orchestrated? Were angels simply messengers, or were they architects, invisible yet inexorably shaping the arcs of human destiny? And if so, whose morality governs them? The divine? The hierarchy itself? Or a law older than even the first recorded prayer? The hierarchy of angels is not a static ladder of holiness. It is a theater of power, of choice, of shadowed intentions. Every level conceals contradictions. Mercy paired with judgment. Knowledge paired with manipulation. Obedience paired with subtle tyranny. The stories we tell, the prayers we whisper, the angels we invoke, these are not innocent acts. They intersect with forces that operate according to logic beyond our comprehension. Forces that sometimes punish, sometimes protect, often confuse. And here lies the final, lingering unease for every legend, for every canonized narrative. There is an omission, a question left unanswered, a story never told. How much of history has been touched by these celestial agents without our consent? And how much of our moral certainty is built on their unseen interventions? Can we ever disentangle divine will from hierarchy, guidance from manipulation, protection from subtle coercion? Or are we forever subject to a celestial game whose rules we cannot perceive, played by beings whose power is absolute and whose motives are inscrutable? In the end, the hierarchy of angels is less a comforting ladder to heaven than a reflection of the paradoxes of morality, power, and choice itself. To study them is to study the shadow side of order, the hidden costs of obedience, the fragile boundary between devotion and devastation. Perhaps the truest revelation is not of who they are, but of what we become under their influence, and the unsettling realization that some of the most profound architects of human history were never human at